All right, looks like we can go ahead and get started. Like I said, this is Patricia Potter with Kirkland Solutions. This is our Intermacs Pedimacs Quality Assurance webinar. I'd like to just welcome those that are on as panelists today from the STS team. We have Carol Crone. She is the director of the STS National Database. We have Emily Conrad. She is the patient safety manager. She's an integral part of the audits as well as the planning and coordination of AQO. We also have Leanne Jones, who is the STS National Database Manager for General Thoracic Surgical Database and the Congenital Heart Surgery databases. And then I'd like to welcome my Kirkland Solutions team. Today on the call, we have Ryan Cantor. He is the Chief Scientific Officer here at Kirkland Solutions. Brangle Singletary, one of our statisticians. I'm not sure if Rama is on the call today. I don't think he is. We have Maceo Clegé, John Pennington, and Jeannie Ann Love. On today's call, we'll be hearing from both Brandon Singletary and Ryan Cantor. They'll be talking about the dashboard, new things coming to the dashboard, as well as going over some reports and future enhancements. At the end of the call, if we have time left over, we'll have an open discussion. Please use the Q&A function. We'll answer as many questions as possible. We encourage your feedback. We love to hear from you. I just wanted to go over a couple of important dates that are coming up. The data entry deadline for Q1 is coming up on April 30th. And those reports will be distributed at the end of June, early July. And then our next Intermacs Pedimacs user group webinar will be next month on Wednesday, May 29th at 1 p.m. Central. And we are in the beginning stages of planning AQO 2024. It's going to be in Nashville, Tennessee this year, September 11th through the 13th, and registration for that is open. Intermacs and Pedimacs will be on the Wednesday of that week. We will have sessions all day. And then also on Wednesday will be general thoracic, adult cardiac will be on Thursday, and congenital will be on Friday. Those of you that may be new and aren't very familiar with AQO, AQO is our annual meeting. It will be in person this year in Nashville. 2 years ago, we were in person. Last year, we were virtual, and then we'll be in person again this year. It's a really great educational opportunity. It's packed full of really good information. We have Q&A after each session. It's a great networking opportunity, especially when we're in person. And then after the conference, we have a Hot Topics webinar. Sometimes we'll get questions at AQO that we can't answer, so we take them back, talk about them internally, and then at the Hot Topics webinar, we can get back to you with those answers. To register for AQO, if you go to sts.org and click on Research and Data, and then go to the link for data managers, you'll be brought to all the information for registering for AQO. There are two different options. There's an in-person option and a virtual pass option. Both of them hold an early bird discount that's honored through May 16th. And there's options to attend 1, 2, or all 3 days. If you abstract for multiple registries, there is an option for that as well. And then at the very bottom of the page, there's information on hotel arrangements. There's a block of rooms at the Lowe's Vanderbilt Hotel with a special AQO rate. So just to be sure, when making your hotel arrangements, to mention that you are there for advances in quality and outcomes. So there is a special rate for that. Emily, should we do the poll?
Sure, I'll go ahead and launch it.
Okay, we have a poll, so we have a question for you all. Okay, so the question is, are you planning to attend AQO in 2024? And the answer options are yes, in person, yes, virtually only, yes, undecided on which option, or no, not able to attend. So we'll give it a minute. This just helps with planning and, letting us know what you all are intending to do.
Like about 80% have filled it out so far.
Okay.
Minute. Give it a couple more moments. Looks like it's pretty much done. No one else is.
Okay.
All right, I'm
So
gonna
it
end
looks
the
like we
poll.
have about 14% that said that yes, they'll be there in person. So that's exciting. 21% that will be attending virtually. 32% yes, but not sure on which way they're going to go. Are they going to be in person or virtual? And 32% can't attend. So thank you all for participating in that. That's helpful for us while we're planning. And then I just have my contact information up here, patricia.potter@corso.net. Feel free to reach out to me anytime if you have any questions. And I also have Carol's contact information. If any questions come up at any time, please feel free to send us an email. So now, Brandon, I'm going to turn it over to you. I'm going to stop sharing, and Brandon's going to talk to us a little bit about the dashboard.
Thank you, Patricia, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks. I just wanted to talk very briefly about the dashboard and some things to expect coming soon. But first, we've had a few questions recently that have come in related to the numbers that are shown both on the summary page when you first land on the dashboard, as compared to the remaining exhibits related to adverse events and some of the metrics. So that main landing page, when you first get to your dashboard, which is kind of our summary page, just gives you a basic count of the forms that are submitted. And that is a live data feed. So every night that's updated and you're able to see what forms are submitted at your site. So any AEs or things that happen at your site are going to be found there. However, for the remaining exhibits, your adverse events and metrics, all of those events are going to be attributed to the implanting center. So if, for instance, a patient is transferred to your facility and then has an adverse event, that adverse event would not show up on your exhibits related to those specific adverse events. But if that form was submitted during the last 4 quarters, it would show up on your summary page. And so if there are any other questions related to that, please feel free to ask me again. I can expound on that further. As far as what to expect in the coming quarter, this quarter, we are looking to add some additional things to the Intermacs dashboard this quarter, including a link within the dashboard that will take you directly to that outcome analytics Kaplan-Meier time to event tab. Right now, that's a separate tab. You kind of have to go back into the web-based data entry and then navigate to that outcome analytics tab. But this will kind of provide you that ability where you're in the dashboard, but wanting to look at more long-term outcomes. You can select that within the dashboard and it will directly link you to the Kaplan-Meier tool. We're also looking to add some new filters that have been requested over the last year or so that we've had the dashboard up and running. As we get more users, we continue to get feedback. And so we are looking to add a pre-implant renal function filter, which will be related to the different EGFR groups of pre-implant characteristics, as well as to kind of match what we have in the Kaplan-Meier tool, a history of durable LVAD versus no prior durable LVAD filter, when you to look at those different patient groups individually if you want to with the dashboard. And yes, I do not have any slides I'm currently sharing. I just figured I would talk on this briefly and then hand it back over to Patricia or Ryan to
Yeah,
talk about reports.
awesome. Great. Thank you so much, Brandon. Does anybody have any questions on that? If you do, you can put them in the Q&A, and we've got Brandon here. We can answer them.
So, yeah, thank you.
Nothing yet. Ryan, would you like to share your screen, and I can turn it over to you now?
Great, thank you, Patricia. Thanks, Brandon. Let's see. Oops, that was sharing my video. There we go. Can you guys see my screen okay?
Yep, we can.
Okay, wonderful. And as I talk, please put questions in. We'll have plenty of time for questions. I've got a few slides here on edits that are coming to the reports in the next cycle. And then I thought I'd go through one of the QA reports at a top level, just to refresh everybody on the key parts of the report. I'll go through that kind of quickly. So if there's anything you want me to spend time on or specific exhibits that you'd like to discuss, feel free to put that in the chat or QA, and we'll have time to go over that. So the last reports went out at the end of March. You get those through the file delivery system, and site administrators have the ability to download those packets of QA reports. I don't think we had any major changes in the last run. We're working on a few exhibits that we hope to have in production for the next distribution, which happens at the end of June. So I'll go through. We've really got two things we're adding. And as always, if you guys have ideas of different variations of the kinds of exhibits we're getting or other things you wish you saw in these reports, let us know. When we get any really good ideas or multiple sites talking about the same thing, we try to get those in the queue for development. I think I mentioned this last time, but I know sometimes new folks are on the call. One of the major changes we've had in the last few quarters was this idea of prior VAD. Historically, in our reports, prior VAD meant any VAD before their first Intermacs VAD, and that could be durable or temporary. With the expansion of use of temporary VADs, we've changed that so that prior VAD now in our QA reports now means prior durable VAD. And so if a patient had a temporary VAD before their first Intermacs VAD, that VAD is still reported in the main, primary VAD group. So we're really just isolating patients that have had prior durable support before their first Intermacs device. So that change has been in production for, I think, at least 2 quarters in the QA reports. One of the things we hope to do in the near future is have those same definitions apply to both the dashboard and the Kaplan-Meier tool. But that work is ongoing. The other thing that we're working on for this quarter is to expand how we report device malfunction adverse event rates. So right now, the adverse event rates are just reported as device malfunction or pump thrombosis, and it tells the number of episodes, patient percent, and rates. So that will all maintain as is, but for patients that receive devices after 11/2/21, where the form versions were edited and there's more granular questions, we'll add a subtable or a sub-exhibit that shows what was the rate of device malfunctions that are indicated as major devices or major device malfunctions, minor, patient-related, management-related, or device-related. So we'll, now that the forms have been in place for several years, we'll try to make an exhibit replicate the granularity of that definition on the adverse event form. Let's see. Some other things we've talked about, but we're not actively working on yet, is looking at adverse event rates for right heart failure severity. And then Brandon went over kind of what's coming down the line on dashboards. And I mentioned, send us your edits, send us your questions. We're happy to discuss. I see we have one question. Let me go ahead and take a look at that, and then we'll take a look at the forms. New report, this is from Matt Lawrence. Newer reports for infection rates by group of infections. It'd be possible to go back and break out the different types of infections within that group. Okay, so I'm hearing look at doing more granular infection reporting. Maceo, will you take a look at that? And take note of that. And yeah, Matt, we'll add that to our list of potential edits.
Yeah,
Oh, the
Ryan,
old
he was
reports used
saying
to
that
break.
it used to, I think it used to, did it used to break it out between MCS and non-MCS infections?
We're just going to like one of our, I want to see how it's reported right now. So we have overall infection, and then we have it broken out by MCS. This is what's live in the reports now. MCS, driveline, and non-MCS.
Okay, so he's saying it still does break it out between MCS and non-MCS, but it doesn't show the granularity of the non-MCS infection. So kind of he's requesting to break that down more, the
Okay.
non-MCS infections.
Okay, I'll make a
So-
note of that.
Yeah.
Breakout non-MCS. Yeah, just whatever like the next level of granularity in the form, we can add those. Hang on, I'm just jotting this down. Okay.
And then, Ryan, we got a couple more questions. One is in the quarterly report under pre-implant comorbidities, it would be nice to see psychosocial issues such as smoking and alcohol use broken down between remote and recent use. We enter this information in Intermacs, so it would be nice to see it on the report.
Certainly, yeah. And especially for the those questions will come out as blank or missing before those questions were added, but they've been there long enough that like in a recent version, like you click on the recent version of the report, we should have good coverage. So that's breakout, comorbidities, psychosocial. Just taking notes of this, smoking and alcohol. Recent versus remote. Sure. Yeah, that's something we can add to our list of potential edits. And I'm hearing bleeding.
Yeah, by severity type. So we have all the different types, subtypes now. And that was new on our revision back in 2021.
Okay, yeah, those all make a lot of sense and are similar to the types of exhibits we have, so it shouldn't be a problem for those three. Those are good additions. Okay, so I just want to take a minute to go through at a top level of. Let me take this one question. Do people see the questions or should I read them out loud, Patricia?
I can read them, Ryan.
Okay.
Is there an opportunity to show comparison to like-size programs to compare apples to apples in regards to outcomes?
So I believe, and chime in if I'm misspeaking any, Brennan, that center volume is on, like some volume categories is on the dashboard as well as the Kaplan-Meier. Are those in production, Brandon, or is that?
Yes, for the dashboard, we do have that filter within the adverse events, patient characteristics tabs, where you can compare your site's volume against other similar volume centers, or, I guess even technically higher or lower volume centers.
Yeah, so that answering that kind of question, it'd be good to use the dashboarding tool. So at the top level, to go through kind of what's included in the report, and if anybody has any questions, type them in and I can pause, but there's some, and this is the most recent report for all patients. There's some other flavors of reports, whether or not you wanted those primary patients or patients with prior durable VADs, or over all time for your site versus Intermacs. This is just a contemporary cohort of the last, I think it's 6 quarters. There's some front matter. It has the number of patients in the report and the time range. And so these are patients who got implanted within that time range, and all of the outcomes and events and characteristics. Towards the end of the report, there's a list of what patients are included and excluded in these reports to help you understand if there's a particular patient you want to make sure they're in one report or another. Table of contents, just some front matter stuff. Let's see. So the first section of the report is looking at those pre-implant. And there's a bunch of definitions here and explanations if you haven't looked at it, on who's included, who's excluded, what do we mean by cumulative reports, what do we mean by recent year reports, and these different patient categories. There's explicit definitions through all that, and who doesn't make it into the report is also listed there. So the first, I'd say, third of these reports is all about pre-implant characteristics, looking at what's happening. Here's just the age one, looking at what's happening at your site over time, what's happening in the aggregate over time. So you can see if there's anything interesting in trends at your hospital or overall, and just the totals for each group. So, in a broad sense, for a contemporary cohort, you can see what the age distribution at your group, your site is versus all of Intermacs. So it goes through a lot of different things, all the basic demographics, device strategy, medications, all these types of things, laboratories. This is where those pre-implant comorbidities, such as psychosocial issues, come out. That's all there. It gets into pre-implant hemodynamics, looking at different distributions and really all the key information collected in Intermacs. Some of the 6-minute walk, some of the quality of life. And again, this is the pre-implant snapshot related to the patient's first implant. So device time, now we're getting into some of the implant characteristics. So the next big section on Exhibit 22 is where we get into adverse event reporting. And the first thing, there's a collection of exhibits here. One of the first things that just looks at the patient percent experiencing each of the adverse events, both at your center versus all of Intermacs. So, here we've got at this fake hospital X is a fake random pool of patients. There's about 11% with hemolysis at Hospital X, and about 7% with hemolysis at experienced hemolysis in all of Intermacs. So that's how to interpret that exhibit. Then it gets, and so those patient percents are good, they're easily interpretable, but a more statistically appropriate way when you're comparing different amounts of follow-up for different patients at different sites is to use adverse event rates. And that's what this Exhibit 22D is. So this highlighted gray rates for early rates within 3 months or late rates after 3 months is a little bit harder to explain, but a more statistically appropriate comparison that takes into account, these patients have different opportunities, different amounts of follow-up to, experience different adverse events. And then after the main 22D exhibit of the top level adverse events, this is where we start breaking out kind of a more granular look at the details of infections. And, if we expand this, that's where, additional tables will come into play or additional lines. And some of these have different dates of like when the events, when the questions went live. That has much less of an impact on the recent reporting. All of the major changes happened quite a while ago in the adverse events data collection. So you get through the adverse events. Another way to compare adverse events is to look at just the time to first of various adverse events. So there's a series of time to event Kaplan-Meier curves looking at just that. So sorry, I went through that kind of fast. Time to first device malfunction or thrombus. There's time to first infection, time to first neurological event. We look at how long the patient was hospitalized for patients that were discharged alive on a device for various types of devices in various quarters. What percent of patients had a readmission within 30 days of discharge is recorded there for various types of devices in different quarters, both at the hospital and for Intermacs overall. There's some data for different like functional capacity and quality of life reported over time. Let's see, I'm trying to get to one of the quality of life exhibits. Gait speed. Some of these don't have great data coverage on some of the things like gait speed and ground making. Here we go. This is looking at EQ5D index at your site versus all of Intermacs pre-implant and at various time points post-implant. Similar reporting for the visual analog scale. This is probably the one that gets most utilized because it's a patient-reported outcome of, how well are you doing, 0 to 100. We also have the KCCQ. We get into the key survival. The event is mortality on a device. So this exhibit 34 is kind of like the primary outcome exhibit that's showing how your patients, within this reporting period, all patients, depending on what report you're looking at, how your center is doing compared to all of Intermacs, patients implanted at the same time. And there's a variety of variations of this exhibit looking at different patient groups. So here it is looking at just LVAD patients. Here it is looking at it within certain eras, although that era doesn't really produce a useful exhibit in the more recent, in the recent report. In the cumulative report, you'd have more lines here. BIVADs, TAHs, various Kaplan-Meiers. And okay, so then the next exhibit shows what's happening to patients within a year other than death. So that you could be alive on a device, you could have die on a device, that's a red line, and it shows how rapidly patients are getting transplanted or very rarely recovery or cessation of support. Let's see. Like I said, there's a patient list of patients that are included in this report and patients excluded from this report and the reason why. And then the final exhibit just shows your site highlighted in red versus all centers in terms of their compliance percentage. And that's just the percentage of follow-up forms that we see scheduled for your patients that are due at the time the report is run versus how many are actually completed. And you can see the vast majority, and we don't have the only center that's labeled in a particular center's device as particular center's report is their own center. So, but you can see that the vast majority of centers are, very high compliance in the upper 90s, if not 100%. So that's the top level view, and we have some good ideas for expanding those adverse event exhibits and the comorbidities. So let's cycle back to questions. Do you want to?
Yeah, I'll go through them, Ryan. Thank you. That was
Okay.
really helpful. I know we have new people on the call, so just kind of going through that at a top level is helpful so everyone can see what is in these reports. So our first question from Kelly, I've asked about this previously and I've been told I can get to this data in a roundabout way, but my center leadership would love to see HM3 specific survival in the reports. So looking at survival specifically for the HeartMate 3.
Certainly. So I can ask if we can add, just like we do LVAD, a breakout Kaplan-Meier in the report for HeartMate 3. If STS approves that, that's not a hard addition. It might not be labeled HeartMate 3. It might be labeled fully maglev or something like that. So it's not a trade name. But you don't need to wait for that edit to get in place. If you go to the Kaplan-Meier tool, you can get that survival curve right now. So let me log in and I'll just show you how easy it is to get to that. If it lets me log in, if I don't have to reset my password. Let's see. There we go. So on Hospital X, again, this is fictitious hospital, so not disclosing anybody's results. But if you go to reports and outcome analytics, this is to generate Kaplan-Meier curves. Just create a new request. So you can decide how many lines, what comparisons are made, but we can say this third one, compare a cohort at your site to the equivalent Intermacs cohort. This has a lot of different outcomes you can look at. Mortality on a device, time to transplant, infection, other various things. We'll just leave it at mortality. But if you go down here to continuous flow, fully maglev, that essentially is HeartMate 3. And so you get the same kind of curve with the, this table underneath is the same data that's presented in, a graphical format here, just so you don't have to estimate what that is. It's telling you what that estimate is and the confidence interval around it. So you should be able to use this to answer the questions for the leadership at your site and do much more with it. You could do maglev within, just LVAD patients or DT patients or an age group. You can use these filters. And if you need a demo of this or anything else, feel free to reach out and we can help you, make the most out of your site data. Okay.
All right, next question from Yang. In regards to 2023 quarter 4 QA report exhibit 18B, adverse event counts, our center noticed that the number of AEs on the recent report for the coverage of July 2022 to December, I think it's supposed to be 2023, is the same numbers on the cumulative report and is inaccurate. This happened to previous quarters reports as well. Is this an issue across all centers and is there a resolution?
Thank you for telling us. That sounds like unexpected behavior. Can you put your center code in the chat and we'll investigate and reach out. That sounds like unexpected behavior and something we need to fix, but we'll have to dive into it to confirm. And if so, we would get all of that resolved by the next quarterly report.
Thanks, Ryan. Next question. For 30-day readmission, I've been told this means readmission 30 days from implant, not 30 days from implant discharge. Is this correct? Can someone explain the rationale to me? we have some patients implanted and stay 25 days, for example, so they would only be captured in this category if they are readmitted 5 days after their discharge. Thank you. That is correct. Yes. So 30-day readmission is looking at readmissions based off of implant date.
Tricia, I thought it was always from the implant discharge date.
It's
A
30
readmission,
days.
because readmission means what I feel is patient is implanted and discharged, and the date starts from there until the 30 days.
I understand what you're saying, and I understand, Raquel, what you're saying, but I believe the way our it is in our reports and in the dashboard is the date is based off of the implant date. Does that sound accurate to you?
Bear with me here. I'm gonna look real quick and see if I can't.
Okay.
I mean, conceptually, it makes sense to base it off discharge date. If you're looking at, you had to be discharged alive with the device in place. I feel like that
Were
is
you readmitted within
higher.
30
You know what
days
I mean?
of
Like
that date?
now, this was,
Yeah.
this exhibit was made a long time ago, so I can't remember exactly what was done. I'll have to, in fact, I probably won't be able to find this out on the fly, but I will find out. And then,
Yeah, because my criteria is if your patient is still in the hospital for, say, for example, 2 months, how are you gonna say readmission? It should be based on implant discharge.
Right. In that case, Neelam, they wouldn't meet the 30-day readmission because they were never discharged.
let's see. Let me look for another 1 or 2 minutes.
Okay. Thank you, Yang. I made a note of your center code and we will get back to you on those errors on your report.
So I'm looking at the code that does this exhibit, and it's keying off discharge date for the rehospitalization data. So I think that's what is desired. And what we can do is add a sentence explaining that to the exhibit.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
Brandon, how about the dashboard for readmissions on the dashboard? What date do you happen to know offhand what date that uses?
I know that's using the time to rehospitalization form being filled out. I would have to go into that field to double check if it's off the implant date or just.
I suspect, Brandon, that the dashboards might operate a bit differently than this specific exhibit in the QA report, because, and correct me if I'm wrong, like the dashboard as it stands is designed around this, like what is the patient percent and rate of something like mortality or infection or something that all patients are at risk of. And so we've added, like on request, this, what was the rate of rehospitalization, that while mathematically accurate, does have this nuance of not everybody got discharged. Does that, like, would we have gone in and made that specific exhibit like more detailed or different than the other ones?
Yeah, I'm looking at the code now to see if I can derive that answer.
Okay.
But Raquel, I hear what you're saying. I do think having it based off the discharge date makes the most sense.
And if that's something you're going to focus on, like right now, I would say, you can confidently do that with the information in the QA report, maybe versus, well, we'll find out from Brandon in a second, but
Yeah, it looks like the dashboard, it's using the same interval as the other AEs, which would be so that's something we could look into changing just for that one exhibit within the dashboard if you want to match what's in the reports.
Okay, that sounds good. And then just a comment from Melissa here. She said, I didn't realize the list of patients included was added. That's a great addition. Thank you. Yeah.
thanks, Melissa.
And then Cyrus said, it looks like the reporting is grouped by discharge date. So yeah, I think that's what
Yeah,
we
I think that's correct.
determined.
Yeah.
Yeah. What other questions does everybody have? Or anything in a report they would like to take a look at? All right, we'll just give it another second, see if anybody sends in any other questions, but thank you very much to you both, Brandon and Ryan. This was a great webinar. And if anybody thinks of any questions, after we get off this call, please send them over and we're happy to meet with you. One more question. Can you show us again the KCCQ?
Yes, let me, I'll share my screen again. I just want to get out of code mode and back into report mode. Give me 1 second.
And the quality of life for patient satisfaction.
Okay, let me share my screen. Okay, so the quality of life data gets used in 2 places in the report. In the kind of front end of the report, it shows some of the detailed questions pre-implant, but then in terms of like tracking it over time, for both the scored KCCQ and Euroqual VAS, which is that self-reported thermometer number, we trend that out over time. So the kind of structure of these exhibits is first it shows the data in tabular form, and then it shows it in a graphical form. And one of the first things that's worth noting is that, not all patients, have completed the data. And so if you look at this complete percentage, and I'll just use, this is all of the Intermacs. So 54% of patients have a completed KCCQ score. And then at 3 months, 52%. So it's hovering between 50 and 60%, which, I mean, is still useful when you look at the scale of the registry. And then for the ones that have it complete, it's looking at what was the average at that time point. And this isn't necessarily like the same like statistical analysis you might do in like a really deep dive into like like a statistical analysis, but it does give you, pre-implant, the patients that fill out a pre-implant KCCQ, are at about a score of 40. And then the patients that are still alive on a device and fill out a KCCQ at 3 months, 6 months, 1 year, are at an elevated height. So let's see. Did that kind of help in interpretation of these curves and exhibits? I see QOL for patient satisfaction. That would be, I don't know, satisfaction, but that would be patient assessment of their, I forget the exact question of their, how would you rate your health? I think is the question for the EQ5D VAS.
Yep, she says you answered. She says thank you.
Okay, great.
And then one more question. What is the expected completion rates for hall walks in quality of life? We are working on a A3 for completion rates and would like our goal to align with Intermacs. I don't know that we have a defined completion rate. We always say, you know, it's not required, but it is highly recommended. I don't know if anybody else has anything to add to that, but I don't think we have a defined rate.
But like if you were looking at this Intermacs one right here for overall, I'm just kind of zooming in at pre-implant, you know, completed was 48%. Another 16% were either declined or not approached because they were too sick to complete it. And then it's this 35% where it was not done. That's where, you know, that's the 35% that would, you know, it would be awesome to see that number drop down. So, you know, that's kind of the state of a contemporary cohort in all of Intermacs.
And then somebody said, we had our DNV survey and they were very interested in quality of life measures. Yes. And that's why it's important to have those surveys completed and entered into the database. I know sometimes it can be time consuming and resources are limited, but
I wonder if we just in our wish list at some point in time, I wonder if we should develop at least something on the dashboard to reflect QOL, either completion rate or score at a time point or something like that, so that there's like, you know, added benefit to getting that in, that you get something really useful.
yeah.
Yeah, I feel like we could come up with an exhibit that calculates that, you know, in this place.
Yeah. Maybe something like that length of stay exhibit, you know, that's like another continuous measure. So anyway, yeah, let's take that back and think about it, Brandon. That'd be kind of cool.
Sure. Yeah.
All right. Any other questions for us? Feel free to send them in. And then just a reminder, our next user group webinar will be in May. It will be on May 29th at 1 p.m. Central Time, 2 p.m. Eastern. So hope to see you all there. And then we'll have another quality assurance reports webinar in a couple of months, probably over the summer. So Ryan, it doesn't look like we have any more questions. So I think that's it. But if anybody has any questions that come up after the webinar, feel free to send them over to me at patricia.potter@curso.net, and we'll get back to you with an answer. Thank you, everybody. I think we'll call it a webinar.